The disparities between the ultra-wealthy and the rest of us are getting abysmal, and that's not good for our society. Over the past 3 years, our leaders flooded our system with stimulus dollars and caused our currency to become less valuable. And now we're seeing how this is impacting our purchasing power. While the elites benefited from these policies the most, everyday Americans are still being crushed by inflation, stagnant wages, and the largest spike in housing costs on record. Our standard of living is collapsing day after day, and no matter what we do or how hard we work, most of us are struggling financially. In 2023, we witnessed the largest drop in the average household income since 2010. At the same time, the child poverty rate in America has risen by more than 100%, while a devastating homelessness crisis continues to spread across the country, and official numbers show that the number of unhoused Americans is rising at the fastest pace on record. Millions of people are deeply suffering, and we need to remember that behind every statistic there's a person, there's a story, there's a life. Imagine how it must be heartbreaking for parents who are working to their bones to provide for their children, but they're feeling that they're falling farther and farther behind. According to Bloomberg estimates, at least 8 million Americans have fallen out of the middle class in the past few years. And now we're hearing more and more news about families that used to live comfortably just a few months ago. But now they're relying on food banks to have enough to eat and to feed their kids. The government continues to deny that this is a serious economic crisis. None of their measures can actually solve any of our problems. No wonder why new research has found that trust in our major institutions is at an all-time low. A growing share of Americans is realizing that the people in power not really interested in making our country any better. Americans are losing hope and motivation, and when they realize that they simply cannot take care of themselves and that no one is going to help them, many people will start to go completely nuts. Without a doubt, the economic desperation our citizens are facing is one of the main factors fueling the massive crime wave our country has been experiencing. A major example of that is the astronomical rise in the number of carjacking cases since 2018. In the United States Capitol, such offenses have tripled over the past 5 years, according to official statistics released by the MPD. It's a heavy pace, says Department Sergeant Valkyrie Barnes. We're seeing carjackings virtually every day, she added. Nationwide, car theft is dominating the headlines in America. A CCJ study found that the number of car thefts in the first 6 months of the year was 104.3% higher than the same period in 2019. Of the 32 cities that the CCJ tracked, 7 of them saw rates shoot up by 100% or more compared to the same time last year. Rochester, New York saw the largest spike in vehicle thefts with a spike of 355%. In the nation's capital, leaders say the district is in a state of emergency due to the soaring rate of offenses. And yet, most of the offenders are walking down the streets completely free. It's ridiculous. Lisa, a recent carjacking victim, said during an interview with News 4 in reaction to the low number of arrests. The suspects who ran up on her with a weapon outside her Capitol Hill home several months ago are still on the loose. The outlet agreed not to use her last name to protect her identity. Unless there is some kind of deterrent to this, it's not going to stop, she said. I've been here for 20 years. I have never felt more afraid, Lisa stressed. Meanwhile, Sergeant Barnes said the law enforcement department desperately needs more detectives. the depth and the pattern cases we're seeing, there is a connectedness between the offenses that are occurring to our victims. It's not just one offender is doing one carjacking. What we're seeing is that the same vehicle is being used in a number of offenses, she revealed. Another officer who spoke with the Straits Times was candid about the situation. It's out of control, he said. In the capital's small Chinatown, residents and business owners are extremely alarmed, saying that the individuals arrested by law enforcement agents are seen back in the streets, committing the same offenses or worse within days. Michael D. Shankle, the chairman of an advisory neighborhood commission in Chinatown, said at a meeting in August that the neighborhood is deeply worried about the increasing social unrest over the past couple of years, with a lack of repercussions for those perpetrating crimes. We need solutions now, Shankle emphasized. It has been a slippery slope in which issues have not been addressed by our government leaders, and this has resulted in where we are today. A significant aggravator to this crisis is the fact that young delinquents are no longer afraid of law enforcement agents, the officer at the community meeting said. Sadly, this trend has also been observed in several areas of the country. At this point, millions of young Americans have already come to the conclusion that the system is rigged against them. So they figure that if the system is fundamentally unfair, why should they try to abide by the rules? Several reports detailed disturbing crimes involving young people. In fact, the Washington Post reported that in May, a 12-year-old was charged in 9 separate carjackings, robberies, and assaults. The data released by the CCJ exposed that the majority of car theft offenders have an average age of 15 years, and disturbingly, some youths as young as 11 years old have been involved in these offenses. Juvenile delinquency is unlawful behavior by a minor and is becoming an epidemic in the United States. Young people who break the law risk entering the largest prison system in the world. Almost 1.5 million people were imprisoned in the United States at the end of 2022, according to data released by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Over the past 5 decades, the U.S. prison population jumped by more than 375%. The Children's Defense Fund says that 1,995 children are arrested in the U.S. each day. This is further proof that our youth is growing up without perspective that conditions will ever improve for them. Many think these unlawful acts are a way to survive, but truly, they're only ending their lives. The lawlessness in our major cities is spreading so fast that many companies are having to do the unthinkable. For instance, Aldi has started to make theft checks a routine part of the checkout process as shoplifting rates continue to shoot up at stores. Some locations are asking customers to empty their bags when they're putting their shopping on the checkout belt to make sure they're not stealing any products from the grocery store. Customers who do not consent are refused service. An Aldi employee told the grocer the policy was introduced at their store last week and the checks were separate from any carried out by security guards. We're asking that they allow us to look in the bags to see they are empty, the worker said. If a bag is not empty, we have been asking to look in their bags to make sure none of our items are in there. We've also been told that if anyone refuses to show us, we are to refuse the sale, although this has not happened yet in our store, the person revealed. On social media, another worker wrote, "I work for Aldi too. It's an awful feeling having to ask customers." The measure came just days after the company reported that it tracked more than 175,000 incidents of shoplifting, a 35% increase compared to 2022. In New York, shoplifters are running so wild that grocers are having to lock the lids of high-end ice cream to prevent people from emptying them out and filling them with garbage. A report by the New York Post showed that the Fairway supermarket on the Upper West Side is guarding $6 cartons of Haagen-Dazs ice cream with bolted plastic tops, which can only be removed with a device at the register. In some cases, freezers are being closed with padlocks. To help maintain the lowest possible cost, a protective lock has been placed on some units of ice cream, a sign at the Fairway store reads. The city's soft regulations to tackle serious offenses actually encourage repeat theft, according to local officers, who reported that almost one-third of all shoplifting busts last year involved the same 327 people who were rearrested thousands of times. The thieves have been stealing frozen goods in the Big Apple for years and then reselling them for cheap, agents have said. Before you know it, all our groceries will be locked up and we'll have to go through a security check just to buy food, said Abby, 34, who was recently shopping for ice cream at Fairway. In most cases, retailers are taking these precautions to avoid raising prices, said Kaylee Locklear, president of the local retail association. They're looking for other ways to figure this out, she said. Sometimes by locking items up, sometimes by removing targeted items from stores entirely, sometimes having more of a security presence, and sometimes getting law enforcement involved in helping prosecutors. At the end of the day, retail theft impacts consumers and the general public in other ways, Locklear stressed. It's also the lost sales tax revenue and lost jobs, she highlighted. They often have to hike prices to offset their losses and stay profitable, even though there are cases in which companies have been formally accused of price gouging. The truth is that many grocery stores are not being particularly greedy. The inflation crisis we're going through is not their fault. It was the government that led us to this mess, and now we're suffering the consequences because consumer prices are not going down anytime soon. Unfortunately, this is just the beginning. The cost of living crisis will continue to accelerate in the months ahead, and that means the level of desperation will continue to increase. Prices at the stores will become even higher this fall and winter, and a major catalyst of that change is the ongoing spike in oil prices. Virtually everything we consume requires transportation, and any oscillation in oil prices affects the cost of shopping, and it affects the cost of freight, and ultimately it affects the products we see on store shelves. After the administration drained over 270 million barrels from the nation's strategic petroleum reserve to a near-record low in hopes of pushing the price of gasoline lower and achieving short-term political goals, global oil prices have actually surged by more than $20 or 32%. The fastest increase since the start of 2022, a rally that was sparked by Saudi Arabia's decision to voluntarily cut more than 1.5 million barrels per day of production, in addition to the reductions agreed by the OPEC Plus group last year. In all, the planet is facing a production deficit of over 3 million barrels per day. As a result, oil prices are expected to keep rising to the $100 mark, and that's also going to be disastrous for United States motorists. Gasoline prices are rapidly rising in many regions right now, so it should be deeply alarming to all of us that the average price of a gallon of gasoline in the Los Angeles area has almost hit the $6 mark. According to the AAA, on Monday, the price of a regular gallon of gas averaged about $5.92 in LA. That's a 5% jump from the day before and nearly 40 cents more than a week ago. Can you imagine the chaos that'll ensue in this country once that starts to happen in many other cities? Many numbers, stats, and indicators are signaling that we're in the very early stages of a major economic meltdown. And as our nation crumbles all around us, millions of citizens are going to become very desperate. Very desperate people do very desperate things. Thank you for watching.